purpose. And so rather than an evolutionary explanation, we're recognizing all of it serves design, and that the genome fulfills purposes far beyond what we were just simply attributing the coding for the proteins.
All right, so that's junk DNA, but people might say, okay, there are bad designs in nature. Let's see, panda's thumb, maybe even things like the appendix in human beings. Other examples are usually
the backbone of human beings.
Yes.
And
what about these things?
Well, notice that these attributions of bad designs tend to fall upon the most advanced creatures. And I think the humble thing to recognize is because these creatures are so advanced, we may not understand the reason for the designs we see in all these creatures. There may be more going on from the creator's perspective than we recognize. And so, for example, the assumption was that the human appendix, being attached to the intestinal system, must be part of the digestion, and yet as we look at it, it serves no purpose whatsoever for digestion. Well, now with additional medical research, we recognize that the appendix serves a purpose in the human immune system, and therefore doctors no longer routinely get rid of your appendix whenever you have abdominal surgery. They'll fix what's necessary there, but they leave the appendix alone because they know it does serve a good purpose. And likewise, you look at the human backbone, and you might argue it's a bad design if we're like other animals and have to run across the savannah all day. But the wonderful thing about the human backbone, it's able to sustain us for long periods of standing, long periods of sitting, long periods of lying down and sleeping, and long periods of running. It can do everything. In fact, I've joked with my wife, it looks like the Creator knew thousands of years ago in designing our backbone that there would come a time when we'd be spending hours a day hunched over a computer console.
That's right. Yes. Okay, so are you saying that as we learn more about these features, we'll uncover that indeed they are good designs?
Yeah, a better argument is to say these are not understood designs at this point,
right.
But as we understand them, we see that what we thought was a bad design is actually a very elegant design. Now, this gives us an opportunity to test our models. We say, okay, here's something that looks like a bad design. Let's do more research. And if the design continues to be shown to be poorer and poorer with respect to time, that's a win for the naturalists or the theistic evolutionists. On the other hand, the more research we pour into it, the more we see that what we thought was a poor design is an elegant design. The more we research it, the more elegant it looks. Then that's a point in favor of a divine supernatural intervention.
Okay, so another test for the model there. Bad design.
All these why questions are tests for the models.
Okay, very good. All right, someone might say, okay, well, we have a whole insurance industry that has this language, acts of God. Okay, Dr. Ross, why are there earthquakes, hurricanes, fires, ice ages, all these bad things? Surely these aren't very, very nice for a creator to have going around on the planet.
Well, you know what? None of that's going to exist in the new creation, but the new creation is a realm where evil can never enter in again. One of the reasons why God set up the laws of physics the way they did is that provides the ideal environment to bring about a rapid, efficient conquest and removal of evil. And it's something I dealt with in some detail on why the universe is the way it is, the book I wrote just previous to this. So I kind of lean on that in this particular chapter, making the point that in that context, what we see is that these things that we call acts of God are ideally designed in the context of the presence of evil and suffering to actually minimize our suffering. So, for example, if you were to take away the earthquakes, then that means you wouldn't have plate tectonic activity. You wouldn't have the recycling of nutrients that's necessary to sustain our civilization. And it's such that if you make the earthquake activity any greater, it'd make it challenging for us to live in cities. But if you made it any less, then we wouldn't have these nutrient cycles being sustained, or you'd have the erosion rates getting out of control, and that would be a problem. Likewise with hurricanes. Yeah, they do cause damage, but it would be even worse if you had no hurricanes, because hurricanes play a crucial role in cooling down the planet. They also play a role in recycling certain nutrients and putting aerosols in the atmosphere. So everything we look at is something that we would call a disaster, or tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires. It's important that our grasses and our forests burn off every once in a while. That too serves a good purpose. But in each case, we can see it's optimally designed to give the human species the greatest possible benefit. The fires aren't too numerous and they're not too few.
So we have the just right amount and intensity of these features for advanced human life to be able to exist the way we are now.
Right.
Okay, very good. Well, you seem to be answering lots of why questions. How about challenging why questions for evolutionary models then?
Well, I kind of close the chapter off with a long list of why questions that I would argue everybody needs to pay attention to. And so I'm saying these are why questions we're trying to answer. Basically what I did is I collected all the objections that we get from atheists to our model in terms of the why questions. But I say, tit for tat, we need to put up a bunch of why questions that they need to look at. Moreover, those same why questions might help us to build a stronger model. So, for example, they would need to be able to explain why does the universe exhibit such extraordinary fine-tuning design, level of fine-tuning design far greater than anything we human beings can manifest in our creativity. One we discussed in Chapter 10 was transitional forms. They seem to appear in the wrong place for the naturalistic model and the right place for a biblical creation model. So that's a couple of examples, but I think there's a couple of dozen I put in that chapter of issues that all creation evolution proponents should be paying attention to.
All right, very good. All the more reason to get the book. Okay, Hugh, what about the next chapter?
Well, the next chapter, we look at how atheist scientists respond to the very compelling evidence that we see, especially in the simple sciences of physics and astronomy, for design. I mean, every astronomer I know of admits that when we look at the universe, we see overwhelming evidence for design for the benefit of life and the human species in particular. Now, that concession alone would argue powerfully for some kind of supernatural God. What I do in the chapter is say, well, as an atheist, how do they respond, and are the responses
.org. Hugh, here we are on Chapter 14, and you hinted last time that we're going back to the simple sciences where those who don't believe, those who come from a non-theistic point of view, have said that they admit to design, but they have answers for that. We'll get to that question in just a minute. But first of all, why is the argument for superintelligent, supernatural design so compelling in astronomy?
Well, this is something that's even been noted by biologists like Richard Dawkins. They all feel pressured by this kind of evidence. And what we notice in astronomy is that we're able to measure certain features of the universe where we can actually determine what the level of design is. Because it's a simple science, we can do that. In biology, it's just a guess, but in astronomy, we can actually make the measurements. And the measurements show us that even for a single factor like the dark energy term, that the level of design we're seeing there is many, many orders of magnitude greater than the best possible human creativity design achievement. And I'm talking better by a factor of like 10 to the 97 times. We see that it's not just dark energy, but many of the constants of physics and the ratios we see in physics show fine-tuning design far beyond what we human beings are capable of achieving. And the list every month gets longer. I think that's what's remarkable, too, in terms of looking at the design features of the galaxy and the solar system, as we've been documenting on our website at reasons.org. The evidence for supernatural, superintelligent design gets roughly a factor of 1 million times stronger every single month. And there's really no other discipline of science where the evidence for supernatural design is accumulating at that incredible of a rate. And so naturally it forces the atheists to try to come up with something to explain